The MEABF payment will be a problem again next year. It's still a problem now, presumably a larger one next year and for the years after that. What is your preferred long-term solution, and is there one that doesn't hurt the city or the district's bottom line?
The disentanglement of our school district and their reliance upon the city of Chicago as a means to support the system is something that I've been talking about for years. When we passed the elected representative school board, we were already working with Senator Martwick to work through the disentanglement. So short-term and long-term is to make sure that the independent governing body, the Chicago Public Schools, can stand on its own. And in terms of the short-term, we'll continue to have conversations with board members. Look, the vast majority of the board members actually agree that it is their responsibility. So it's not a debate on whether or not where the overall will is. So I'm going to work with the board members. We're going to work with the General Assembly. My office is going to lean in even more because, look, it's ultimately on my watch to ensure that we create systems that are economically solvent. And I'm bold enough and audacious enough to actually take on that challenge. So again, the vast majority of the board members recognize that securing the pension and retirement for their workers is their responsibility. You saw in our last presentation, pardon me, I don't want to assume if you saw in our last preparation, but when our chief financial officer laid out that the city of Chicago subsidizes or supports our public schools in the tune of $1 billion, there are a host of things that we have to look at as a city and as a independent governing body, Chicago Public Schools, of how we disentangle decades of reliance. We're up for that challenge, though.
Do you think there needs to be a change in state law to formally move the responsibility of that payment to
Yes.
the independent board?
Yes, I mean, this is what I'm saying. The disentanglements are real. And in order for this body to behave as an independent structure like every other school district across this state, it is going to require some codification.
Can we keep moving just because we have a lot of reporters? Sorry. Thanks.
On that payment, like you have few options for the missing revenue for 2024, or more limited options, but the 2025 budget, we're earlier into that year. Are there other options, available options that you have that you could
Yes.
kind of proactively do now? And would those options, as opposed to when you passed the budget, you rolled out significant layoffs or seeking furloughs, are you reconsidering or feel like you have to reconsider that now?
Look,
for
we've
2025.
Thank you for that question. Look, we've always worked hard to ensure that we're not laying people off and cutting services. We've been able to effectively do that through responsible budgeting. We do have other options, though.
Yeah, and I think the question presumes that we're not working with CPS to solidify the payment for 24 or 25, right? We're still working with CPS and the Board of Education. I think, as the mayor has just rightfully stated, the entanglements are real, but so are the need for us to work collaboratively and cooperatively, not only with the Board of Education, not only with the state of Illinois, but with our city council on the future for how we responsibly disentangle from CPS. As the mayor said, the CFO last time laid out just how reliant CPS is on the city of Chicago for everything from their pension payments to the capital improvements on their buildings. Those entanglements are real. And so I only say that to say we don't want to leave CPS without a partner while also giving them an obligation. And so I think it behooves all parties to work responsibly together to figure out what is the pathway to ensuring that both of our institutions are not only solvent, but that we are helping CPS towards independence.
And then shifting topics, I'm going to try to get 3 in 1 here. So there's a special city council meeting on Monday to consider the 35th ward appointment. One, why go through that like a special meeting as opposed to the regular city council meeting? Are there things coming in April where you would like to ensure another ally on the council for a tight vote? And then have you made that selection, and why is it Anthony Quezada?
Well, I have not made any announcement on who it is, and the government that I am leading in this moment, as you all know, that we don't have a lot of time, quite frankly, with all of the attacks that are coming from the federal government, as we push back and stand up to the Trump administration. The Trump administration doesn't want to see the type of affordable housing units that we're putting forward. The Trump administration certainly does not believe in public education. If you look at two of the main things that we're talking about today, we're talking about building more affordable homes. The Trump administration hates that concept and idea, so much so that he's working to defund it. Our contract that the Chicago Public Schools has worked towards finalizing an agreement. The Trump administration is opposed to small class sizes, sustainable community schools, and as well as protecting workers. And so the business of government has to move with some expediency because the time is now for us to ensure that working people can afford to live in this city, as well as being able to send their child to a fully funded school. That's what we're doing. We're doing that now, and I think that there's a lot of excitement at the city council level to move these projects and these opportunities again with expedition.
Good morning, Mayor.
Good morning.
We're going to pivot to tourism now. Are you concerned how or if the Trump administration actions or worries about deportations might affect tourism? Is that something you guys have talked about?
That's a good question. Are there legitimate concerns around the type of fear and intimidation that this administration is trying to bestow upon the city of Chicago? We're aware of it. We're not going to flinch, though. It's the city of Chicago is one of the top destinations in the world for corporate relocation 13 years in a row. The best big city in America 8 years in a row. The most diverse economy, having a beautiful landscape in, downtown. Our world's fresh water. Again, the diversity of our economy. Our sports teams are playing pretty well right now. I want to give a special shout out to Giddy. We got to figure out how to keep them here and keep those averages going up. Look, and with all that being said, because the city of Chicago has been such a welcoming destination, we're not going to change our values simply because the president is jealous. He's jealous. He's jealous of Chicago. He wished he had an opportunity to run one of the most remarkable destinations on the planet. Unfortunately, he's stuck in D.C. right now, but we're going to do something about that in a few years.
I don't want this to be my second question, but is the city concerned about tourism
No.
coming? Okay. My second question, you have a new liaison to go down to Springfield. I'm wondering if you can talk about ticking off again. I think I've asked you before, what are your 3 priorities in Springfield with
I think we have 5.
Okay.
So yes, we have a number of people in Springfield that are carrying the agenda on behalf of the city of Chicago. Again, the loudest voice for our team in Springfield is me. I had a conversation with the Senate President yesterday. Senate President Don Harmon is my mentor. He gave me my first job, and I was his director of constituent services, making $10 an hour. And now I call him Senate President, and he calls me Mr. Mayor. Had a few conversations with Speaker Welch. On rotation, our budget director and our CFO have had regular conversations with Springfield. My chief of staff, she understands that place better than any other chief of staff in the history of Chicago because she's been there. And her relationships, of course, are tried and true. And so those top priorities, CPZ, if you don't mind just running through them, there's a number of them.
Yeah, a lot of them focused on revenue. So there's the personal property replacement tax. There's also the telecom fix that we were working on last session, as well as the 911 surcharge, extending that. The sunset was set for this year. We're extending it a little bit further. We have mandated categoricals in the Illinois State Board of Education funding. This would be something that wouldn't just benefit Chicago Public Schools, but it would benefit the entire plethora of school districts, the 852, because as you know, with mandated categoricals, there are certain services such as transportation and special education and bilingual education that school districts are required to provide, but the state does not reimburse at the fullest amount. And so right now, there's some discussion about increasing the proration so that we can get closer to 100% reimbursement, which would then mean that all school districts would get more money into their budgets to take care of the funds that to take care of the services that they're required to give. And then the last is the One System Initiative. This is the partnership with the state in terms of, what we took with our legacy homelessness system and the emergency temporary system that we put up, because of the humanitarian crisis. We built the infrastructure for something that would live beyond that crisis, but ultimately be able to expand our beds to 126% increase, up to 6,800 beds, have a 24-hour access point, so that now we have nobody on a wait list if they need shelter. So those are the 5 top priorities. Of course, we know that transit is huge, and there's a lot to be discussed there with respect to the RTA and the various proposals that are put out by some of our colleagues in the labor space, as well as, the advocates.
And thank you.
And good morning, Mayor.
Good morning.
I want to follow up on the issue of teen opportunities. Obviously, there will be 29,000 young people put to work for this summer, but I'm pretty sure that multiples of that number will be likely applying for that. What are the other kinds of things that can be done to give the teenagers who aren't part of the jobs program something to do, or some other outlet that can still, keep down the number of teen trends that we might see?
Yeah, thank you for that question. This is, where my heart is, investing in our young people and creating opportunities for them all the way up to the ages of 24. At 49, if you're under 30, you're considered young to me now. I can't believe that has happened. But we know that the programming for the city of Chicago historically has been 14 to 18, but we've expanded it 14 to 24. This is why I'm calling on everybody to lean in. There are investments that the city can make, and then there are things that I know that the business community, they want to do more. And many of them have leaned in, but we do need them to do more. Our faith community, I'm having conversations with different members of our various faith communities to create these spaces and give them more opportunities so that they're not wandering in the wilderness or lost in space. Use any other axiom if you wish, but I think you get my drift here. That if young people are not given constructive spaces to, experience joy, they're going to find them on their own, right? And so we're doing our part. Our new superintendent for our parks is going to work to make sure that parks become, open spaces for constructive interactions. We're going to be working with our Chicago Public Schools to create more constructive spaces. This is really going to come down to all of us in the city of Chicago to ensure that our young people are valued and loved and seen. So it's accountability and opportunity. So thank you for asking it that way.
And one for Commissioner Boatwright. Especially for the initial projects that or the parcels that you put up there, is there any consideration or any guardrails to make sure that it's not starts off gentrification that could change the character of the neighborhoods and the affordability?
Yes, that's a great question, and we do have guardrails in place. We have 140% AMI cap for the owner occupant for each of the developments. And so we want twofold. We want you to be able to generate wealth and create density, putting the lots back in productive use, but we also want to make sure that we have guardrails in place so that we don't experience gentrification in these neighborhoods decades down the road. We don't anticipate that, but even without that, we want to make sure that we're being really thoughtful. And so the 140% AMI allows us to have more diverse incomes in the neighborhood, allows us to create more density in the neighborhood, because we're not talking single-family homes, it's single-family up to 6 units, and that creates more naturally occurring affordable housing as well. So absolutely, we want to ward off gentrification across all 77 community areas wherever possible, and this is one lever that we're able to pull with the AMI caps.
Hi, Mayor. Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
Can you speak directly to the Chicago taxpayer, and you've spoken to this a bit already this morning, about how the city will afford the new teacher's contract and the $175 million pension payment?
Can I just offer up just some clarification? The contract is paid for through a separate entity of government, the Chicago Public Schools. And that in part is the responsibility of the CEO to be able to come up with mechanisms to be able to satisfy that. Just like when I passed my budget, I spoke specifically of how we're going to pay for our raises for our police officers. We're even projecting, how we'll pay for raises for our firefighters and all of our city workers. These are what budgets ultimately do. There's enough revenue that we have generated from our public schools that allows for this contract to be settled. And what's also important here is, because this is the question that I know that taxpayers ask, what are they getting in their public school system? So if you will indulge me for a second, can I tell you what the taxpayers are getting? Okay, so we're getting up to 70 more sustainable community schools, which is a model that has proven to work better than school privatization and turnarounds, which cost the taxpayers, right? We're also reducing class sizes where there are very clear instructional outcomes that benefit all of the taxpayers when children are in classrooms that are smaller. And I know that personally as a public school teacher. Here's what we're also getting. We're actually protecting experience. When Donald Trump is firing government workers, and particularly these are individuals who have been a part of the public servant life for years, we're ensuring that there's continuity and sustainable and predictable workforce so that parents don't have to worry year to year whether or not they're going to have class sizes that are manageable and teachers who have professional, long-standing experience. So I'm confident that the people of Chicago are relieved, first of all, that we're not going to have a teacher strike or even a strike vote. It's the first time in 15 years. That also provides confidence with our business community because it provides, when we have labor peace, there's more predictability on how an economy can ultimately be solvent. So again, the Board of Education will ultimately have to ratify if the full membership votes to accept this. But again, our investment in our public schools, the last thing that I'll say is it's very apparent and transparent. The largest TIF surplus in the history of Chicago. As indicated, we have established over $1 billion of just structural support for the school district. I'm not going to let this school district fail.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. The pension payment falls back to CEO Martinez, but ultimately he answers to you, right?
Well, he should. But regardless of whether or not he should or should not, here's what we do know. The contract matches the value system of our city. It does. Just like the contract for our police officers match the value of our city, right? We want our officers to be well compensated and paid, right? We all agree with that. We want them to have the support that they need to be effective. That's why we have more helicopters, and we've created a structure that allows for mental health professionals to show up to mental health crises because we have to take that responsibility off of our police officers. These are the responsible things that I've done since I've been mayor. And we're going to continue to write these systems so that they speak to the values of working people in this city. And no one in this city wants to see anybody in this city underpaid or undervalued. I know that. So, we got it done. The first mayor in 15 years to get a contract done, keep labor peace. We've raised the wages of our park district workers, stabilizing those workers as well. Passed the paid time off ordinance, so whether you're in a union or not, you get 10 days off. It's the most pro-worker administration in the history of this city. And I'm very proud of the fact that we have a long history of standing up for workers.
Mayor, happy belated birthday.
Thank you. I would just say that you all are making my siblings a little envious because I've gotten more birthday wishes and gifts, personal gifts, I've gotten more birthday wishes in these last few days than all of my 9 siblings have gotten combined over the course of 49 years. But thank you for the birthday wish.
You bet. On that 175 million non-reimbursement for the MEBF, I know there was a letter your finance team sent out to alders. I didn't quite understand. Basically saying to plug that hole, you'd be sort of monitoring revenues and expenses. Perhaps revenues come in over projections. Is that how you plan to balance the current fiscal year's budget, given that 175 million? Or can you just explain to me how this budget will be in balance now?
Annette.
Sure. So I think I want to remove the notion of balanced budgets. You balance a budget when you pass a budget. You monitor your budget throughout the year to ensure your revenues are coming in as you projected, and that if they're not, that you are mitigating that by lowering your expenditures. Last year, we forecasted the non-receipt of the MEABF payment in our forecast, and so we took measures to reduce our expenditures in the chance that those that the agreement couldn't be struck with the Board of Education. So we took those measures last year, and so what we're doing now is reconciling the end of the year to see how the rest of our revenues came in and the rest of our expenditures came in, and that report will be due in June to City Council.
Okay. And then to follow up on what Tara was asking about, because the board did not vote on a supplemental budget, and this new contract will cost, according to CPS estimates, about $300 to $400 million a year. Mayor, is it your recommendation still that the CEO and the board consider new short-term borrowing to be able to pay for this contract?
Well, look, if you look at how contracts have matured over time, I believe this contract that our teachers are currently, the one that has expired, I believe that contract was anywhere from $800 to $900 million over the course of that contract. So the gradual maturation of all of our contracts is just on par for what workers deserve, particularly as inflation has gone up. Here's what I can tell you, that I'm going to continue to work with the Board of Education, its leadership, as well as board members, as well as our workers, because it's not just this contract. You have a principal's contract. I just believe that it's important that we remember that there are multiple contracts inside of our schools. There's a principal's contract. There are a contract for workers who are SECAs and security guards, Local 73. And then, of course, you have CTU Local 1. And it's incumbent upon all of us, including all of our workers and our partners, to come together to ensure that there's a pathway for solvency. Now, here's what I'm going to commit to. I'm going to commit to making sure that our public education system doesn't fail the people of this city. And I'm going to do everything in my power to ensure that every single family across this city receives a well-rounded education that's fully funded and supported.
Mayor Johnson, for the
See,
second...
you moved seats there. Apparently you were very eager to ask a question. Now you got to get to it quickly, okay?
Well, the people of Chicago are asking me to ask you
So
a
go ahead
couple
and
of
ask it.
questions.
Go for it.
Every single reporter here asked 3 questions, and you didn't interrupt any of them, by the way. For the second week in a row, we had mobs of violent black teenagers descending on not only residents, attacking police, attacking businesses, shooting at people, obviously the shoplifting, property damage. And you weren't even in Chicago. You were out campaigning for another unpopular mayor in St. Louis, where your wife Stacy is from. And
You need the question.
people are asking me to ask you to add insult to injury. The very next night, not even 24 hours later,
Okay,
you
we
held
need the
a
question.
campaign kickoff fundraiser. How could you possibly think that this is the right time to kick off your reelection campaign? And
Thank you.
people
Thank
are
you.
asking me,
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
All
citizens
right,
are
so
asking.
if your question is about me, about my reelection. So first of all, here's what I'm focused in on. It's creating more opportunities for people to afford to live in this city. As you have seen today, my administration has moved with a great deal of expediency, transparency, and boldness to build more affordable homes, because there's the pathway to sustain our communities and to make sure that they're safe. Here's what we're also committed to doing, is to ensuring that there is a workforce that is stabilized in this city so that we can continue to grow our economy. You know, the most important thing for the people of Chicago to know, the most important thing that they need to know, is that I'm focusing on people. That's what my focus has been on. And whether that's building more affordable homes, ensuring that our workforce is stabilized, investing in our young people, expanding mental and behavioral health, these are the things that the people of Chicago want. They want their schools to be fully supported. We've done that. They want their communities to be affordable. We're doing that. They want to make sure that our communities are getting safer. 25% reduction in violent crime just this year alone. And so we're going to continue to do that work throughout my term here. And then when it's time for us to make that announcement around what our vision is for the next 4 years, we'll make sure that you get an invitation.
Well, we got to keep moving.
Investing in people.
We got to keep moving.
Yet, the people who have actually invested in real businesses in downtown are saying that you're destroying their investments. Real residents.
Is there a
who
question?
invested in
All right,
homes,
we got to keep moving. I'm sorry.
are saying that you're destroying
We can't
their
do this.
investment. How is it possible that someone like yourself doesn't seem to understand the actual definition of the word investment?
Yeah.
All right, we'll
We're
go to
investing
Mariah.
in people. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll go to Mariah. Thanks.
Hi.
Can you talk about how the city is exploring options to cope with the $125 million in cuts to the Chicago Department of Public Health? Are there any legal avenues the city's exploring to push back against these funding cuts?
Yeah, those cuts are they're harsh, right? The number of people who will be impacted, who rely upon our public health system, it's going to hurt us, right? No doubt. Look, I think it's important, to just note that our work, not just with the city council, but our partnership with county government and the state of Illinois, we'll continue to lean on one another to show up to the best of our ability in the event those cuts actually start to come down. As far as any legal actions, of course, we're going to explore all different legal avenues to ensure that the tax dollars that we send as a city to the federal government, that we get a return on those investments.
And what's the status of the 100 positions that are potentially going to be cut? Have you identified those people, notified those people?
It's a great question. I don't really start to provoke personnel issues out loud, but, no decision has been made just yet, but go ahead to our budget director.
Every single one of those workers is still working.
Thank you.
Hi, Mayor. Wanted to ask about CPS, but William's question is interesting because I think or statement, there is a question in there. So you had the large gathering of young people in Streeterville, young black men, teenage boys. And so some people see that and they're afraid. Perhaps they shouldn't be, but the reality is they're afraid, and there's a sense that, what's happening? Why are young people taking over my neighborhood? Do you worry about the electoral consequences of that sort of happening? And what is the message that, oftentimes these are peaceful, these are just teens that have every right to be downtown gathering, but it still raises concerns among some people.
Mm-hmm. I would venture to say that most people are concerned when our young people, again, are not in constructive, safe spaces that allow them to be teens. That's why I created a safe space forum. It's not impossible, but it can't just be government. It can't just be government. And this is why we're calling on everyone. The consequence is not about elections. The consequence is about making sure that our young people find their purpose and that people can live in their neighborhoods, without wondering if, their neighborhoods are going to be disrupted in any kind of way. Nobody wants to experience that level of disruption, and we're certainly not tolerating it, and I never have. As someone who is raising a family, I want my sons and my daughter to be able to go to places in this city without being judged. But I also don't want them to be in places where they're going to feel unsafe. And keep this in mind, you all. We had an event that was dedicated to young people at Navy Pier, where 1,000 of them showed up the very next day, and you did not have a single incident. Can we just do ourselves a favor? Let's actually show what a constructive environment looks like so that people know that it's possible. And I get it. I mean, I'm not dismissive of the fact that this did happen. I'm saying that the very next day, we actually proved to people that young people can come downtown if they're supported, loved, invested in, have some structure. For too many of our young people, and it doesn't mean that it's the vast majority of them, but for too many of them, they just don't have enough structure. I know that as someone who is taught in our public schools. If you don't have structure, the idle minds start to linger. So what I'm saying is there's proof positive that investing in young people and providing a constructive space for them to be able to hang out, you can do that without incident. When we do not do that, we do raise the risk of our young people, provocating, a desire and a need, to be able to be themselves. And again, the accountability and opportunity is the focus, but it's going to take all of us.
Now that the CTU contract is just about done, have you thought at all about recommendations to the Board of Education to reform the district, such as dismantling CPS's central office, maybe taking those thousands of jobs and reinvesting that back into the classroom? And now that it apparently is over, waiting on those final votes, that meeting at City Hall 2 weeks ago Wednesday, what would you like to now tell us about kind of what you said or any role that you played in landing the contract?
Well, I said get it done, and they did, and I gave them direction on how to get it done. I guess the one benefit of having been a part of these conversations, I was able to help, CPS leadership and the CTU see how close they really were, and then provided a pathway for them to land what essentially were non-economic issues primarily. As far as the district moving forward, look, there's no secret that, I'm going to do everything in my power to ensure that every single child in this district receives a high-quality education. That's why I'm pleased, particularly around class size and protecting experienced teachers and expanding our sustainable community schools. Something that we didn't talk about enough, but there are provisions and measures within this contract that will help us to address this. Our chief operations officer is here. We've attracted billions of dollars. Our commissioner, Boatwright, is here. Billions of dollars into the city of Chicago. The city of Chicago, the difference is we're open for business, we're just not for sale. And 37,000 construction jobs, roughly. And so we're going to begin to move our district towards ensuring that there's access to the trades. A program that we're running right out of City Hall right now is with streets and sanitation. You were part of that conversation, and thank you for that coverage around the young people who signed up for a summer opportunity to work in streets and sanitation, and 50 of them stayed on with good union-paying jobs. I believe this year we have 100 signed up for this program. And so our school district, as we move towards STEAM and other areas of interest to make sure we're creating the next layer of workers, that we're going to have a whole bunch of construction jobs available for our people in this city. And the 1901 project on the west side of Chicago, that's a $7 billion investment, as well. So the district is not so much dismantling the district, it's making sure that we structure the district to respond to the growing economy.
Charlie?
Oh, hey.
Hey, Mayor. Sorry, but I want to circle back to the teen issue again.
Okay, sure, it's okay.
the
This
folks-
is an important topic. You don't have to apologize. This is important.
The folks over at SOAR sent a letter to your office
Yeah.
yesterday demanding there be some change. Alderman Brian Hopkins, in announcing the arrest of the 15-year-old for the AMC shooting, said, you know, he would have been affected by the curfew and wouldn't have been on the street had that time been pushed up the 2 hours. What is, from your perspective, the disadvantage to moving that curfew up 2 hours? And when we talk about teen gatherings, your event at Navy Pier was lovely and all the kids had a good time,
Be careful here.
but it was during the daytime.
Okay, I just want to make sure. I thank you for being careful there.
And
Yep.
it wasn't at the same time when a lot of these kids are out. So what can we do to address not only the age problem in the area, but also the creation of activities at a time when a lot of kids are on the streets or going to the streets?
Well, first of all, we don't want to assume that all of our children are on the streets after 8 o'clock or after 9 o'clock or after 10 o'clock. And we also cannot assume that just because children are hanging out during the daytime, that they don't continue to hang out downtown. Many of them did. They did. And it happened without incident. So I don't want to put a disclaimer there. I wouldn't put a disclaimer there, right? And as far as a 15-year-old having a gun, let's just pause for a second. A 15-year-old having a gun. Now, we've removed 12,000 guns last year, and we're going to continue to do that. A 15-year-old that has a gun at 4 o'clock, 8 o'clock, or 10 o'clock is a problem, no matter what time of day that is. And that's why we're working to ensure that we get guns off the streets, right? Because whether that child has access to a gun at 2 o'clock or 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, that is the biggest problem there. As far as that letter is concerned, if you read the letter, they pretty much said what I've said. It's going to take all of us. That everybody has to lean in to support our young people. This is not just simply an act of government, right? Most of the challenges that we are experiencing in the city of Chicago do require all of us to participate. You know, that's why it's imperative that, again, our business community, and many of them have stepped up, putting more dollars towards violence prevention. People are working hard to prevent these type of incidents. One is too many, but let's just keep this in mind. It's not like this is happening every night, every weekend. One is too many. Just like one 15-year-old having access to a gun is too many. That's what the collective work of our city has to be a part of, is ensuring that we're creating not just accountability, but opportunities. And we have to do the things that work. And what I have seen is that we are better off putting our efforts towards getting guns off the streets, creating more structure for our young people, and then doing that together. That is how we build an apparatus that supports our neighbors while also making sure that everyone is safe.
The one thing that people talked to us about yesterday, and you know, we live in Streeterville, the NBC Towers in Streeterville, we talked to a lot of people. They felt as if the police had their hands tied behind their back by the current curfew, and wondered if there wasn't some way to authorize the commander on the scene to say, hey, this situation is getting out of hand now. I'm imposing a disperse order now, when they see the kids running up and down Columbus and being a danger not only to anybody else, but to themselves as well.
That's right.
Has
Yeah.
that been one of the things considered?
Well, look, constitutional policing is what we ultimately have to adhere to. And if I'm not mistaken, there were multiple arrests that were made. Now, I don't know how many arrests that were made were based on curfew, and we did hold, and we do have at least a person that's been identified as the shooter from a couple of weeks ago. So clearly there's a commitment to accountability. Here's what I will say, is that it's not just policing. There's a lot that we have to do to make sure that young people who believe that's the only way in which they can have a good time, it's going to take more than policing to, you know, make sure that we're engaging responsibly. That's why I was appreciative of the tone of the letter that also said what I've been saying, is that it's going to take more than just government. We have to have support for these young people. We have to have support, you know, for the homes. There has to be a level of accountability even as we create opportunities, and that's what I'm committed to. Yeah, you're welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning.
For the record, 49 is young to me, too. and Craig. Just so you know. Yeah, this is right. So, anyways, back to CPS. I know while a contract was settled without a strike, it took a lot of turmoil to get here.
Yeah.
Unsuccessful ouster of Pedro Martinez. You had a school board that quit. Was it all worth it for you? Especially in the end, Pedro Martinez is still there, the loan wasn't taken out, and teachers are getting raises that they were offered last summer.
Well, look, when you have class sizes that you could not negotiate over in previous contracts, and you're actually able to land a deal that lowers class sizes for the health and the benefit of that child, I would say it's worth it. For our veteran teachers that have been, marked with, disparaging, sometimes direct and indirect characterization of a veteran teacher, that we have, secured work experience, I think it's worth it. We had 20 sustainable community schools. That was part of an outbreak of organizing as a response to the expansion of privatization and school turnarounds that laid primarily veteran teachers off, Black and brown women. And now we have an opportunity to expand that to now 70. I think it's worth it, right? Because if you think about, diet and as well as Beidler Elementary School, these schools were slated for closure. And the instead of the turnaround model or the privatization model, the closure model, we went to a sustainable community school model. And now those schools are examples, and now 50 more of those type of schools will exist. I think that's worth it. The fact that we actually have support for arts and sports, particularly after school, we doubled the amount in the contract so that smaller schools are supported. When I would visit small schools, if you're not sort of a powerhouse school with booster and PTOs that help raise dollars, some of those schools do not have rides to away games. We doubled the amount of dollars for after-school programs. And within the contract, there's a commitment for 400 more teachers' assistants. I mean, I could keep going. I'm saying all of it is worth it when we are investing in our public accommodations. I mean, as far as I think to the premise of your question, with all the challenges that we had to get to this point, this clearly wasn't about the raises, right? Because that part in and of itself stayed the same. But all the other things that I just listed off, those things were not agreed upon. And, when you're fighting to ensure that we have a district that respects working people in this city, it will always be worth the fight if the people of this city get to benefit from that fight. And I believe that if the members of this union decide to, codify the agreement, it's going to be an incredible win for the people of Chicago, and that fight is always worth it.
And everything you just listed, obviously very costly. CPS says they have the money this year, the 24-25 school year, to pay for this contract. But there is no money. They're facing a huge deficit for the remainder of 3 years of this contract. So you still have control over the school board for the next year, and as budget season opens up over the summer, as they have to come up with a balanced budget by July. What are your suggestions of how to
look, that's a great question. Look, we'll do it. Just like I came in and I had a $500 million deficit in my first budget, had $1 billion deficit in the second budget. We rectified that. We are leading in this moment. Look, I never expected the job to be easy. Nothing that I have ever done in my life has been easy. But what I can say is that I put in the work to ensure that we level set in this city without harming working people. Now, all of us are going to have to roll our sleeves up to ensure that we do that with CPS's budget. We're going to, continue to organize and work in Springfield for CTA. I mean, if you think about it, all of the systems that we've inherited up to this point, have these, I guess, fiscal challenges. But we're up for it. I mean, this is Chicago. Remember the last contract, folks said we didn't have enough money for that as well. And the contract before that, there were some people that believed that I gave police officers too much money. Many people talk about how we may not have enough money to solve, these fiscal challenges. But yet somehow, through and through, we have figured it out. And we will continue to figure it out because it's so paramount for the people of Chicago that I get it right. And so far, I think we've done a good job of getting it right. Thank you for that question.
Hey, Mayor.
Hey.
We saw 2 elected school board members who were endorsed by CTU sign their name onto that 7-member letter against the borrowing plan. Does that signal trouble for the union and your education agenda ahead of the next school board elections?
No.
Following up on Justin's question earlier, why should Chicagoans believe the process to pick a 35th Ward alderman wasn't a rubber stamp?
Every mayor has enjoyed the responsibility of appointing someone that reflects the values of that particular community. I will do the same.
Hi, Mayor.
Hey.
When you say you support working with the Board of Ed on the MEABF, are you saying you support them having another go at a budget amendment vote to reimburse the city, perhaps when they vote on the contract?
Yeah, that's a good question. Look, the vast majority of the board supports this effort. Here's what we have to do. We have to work collectively to work to disentangle particularly the financial reliance on the city of Chicago. That work is going to be ongoing. It's inevitable. Whether it happens now or later, it's inevitable. But yes, I'm going to continue to always work with people.
Do you think you have the support for it to happen now, maybe when the next time they vote?
Again, the vast majority of the people of the board actually support this. Thank you.
This will be the umpteenth question on the teen gatherings.
Okay, all right. No, I do. I mean, and seriously, I do appreciate the interest here. I mean, this is an important issue for the people of Chicago.
So you talked a lot about the need for businesses and churches and whatnot to step up, to provide spaces and whatnot. But you've used the word accountability a lot. Where is there need for more accountability for these teens who come down and misbehave, to use a soft term?
Yeah, I mean, look, whether they are misbehave or they do something violent, I mean, I think we can name it. Some of the acts were violent. All of them weren't. Accountability comes when, unfortunately for some of these young people, and all of them were not teenagers, by the way, there were several arrests that were made. Several arrests. And as far as anything beyond an arrest and going through the process of within our legal system, that is a layer of accountability. I believe what I'm offering in this sense, that there are different mechanisms of accountability. I'll give you an example. I didn't need to get arrested when I misbehaved for me to straighten up. I don't know if anybody needs to get arrested. What I'm saying is that there are accountability mechanisms when you have businesses who help support our young people and show themselves to be mentors, show themselves to be parental figures, if you will. That level of accountability is important, right? And this is why activity is so important. I remember when I was a coach at Jenner, where I taught middle school, and there were some players of mine that will get out of line in a different classroom. And you know what some of those teachers would say? Do I need to talk to Mr. Johnson? And some of those players, the vast majority of them would straighten up. That's accountability, right? And I think the more we create those spaces for our young people, there are other adults in their lives that they are accountable to, and in many instances can incentivize them, walking a more purposeful life.
I want to also follow up with the meeting last night in Hyde Park about the shelter. Folks down there really upset after being apparently promised that this was going to be a temporary shelter for the migrants. Now it's turning into a permanent shelter for legacy homeless or whoever needs it. They're not happy about it. Is there any chance that this is going to change, or are these people just going to have to deal with it?
Well, let me just say the first thing, that I'm very proud of how the city of Chicago has stepped up in our response to homelessness. As my chief of staff indicated, our One System initiative, we created more shelter beds year over year than any other time in the history of Chicago. I believe we increased it by 126%. And so for the first time, likely in the history of Chicago, when people call 311 looking for shelter, there's not a waiting list. I said that I would respond to the housing crisis. I said that I would respond to the homelessness crisis, and we are responding to that. And this One System initiative, where I believe 89% of those who are in shelter are individuals that have historically lived in Chicago or part of who have grown up in Chicago. And then the others are individuals who are part of our shelter system who have come from other places on the planet. But in terms of this process and our commitment to having a community dialogue, that is something that it's important. And you know, Tina, if you want to add anything else to it.
Yeah, I think what's important to note is that the shelter was originally opened by the state. And, you know, the process that they undertook to inform community, we did not have control over that. We have participated in past community meetings, and we will continue to dialogue with the respective community groups as well as the local electeds to move forward and stand in our values. We want to ensure that every Chicagoan that is experiencing housing instability or homelessness has a place where they can lay their head and be on a path to self-sufficiency and self-determination. And we will continue to defend those investments in those specific resources.
I guess people in the community are saying, you know, it's like they want you to hear that they don't want the shelter there. They don't feel this is the right place for a shelter. Is there really dialogue that's going to change the situation, or are you set on this being the spot for that shelter?
At this point, that's the location that has been identified by the state, and we are in the process of working with the state to move forward with these particular investments.
Good morning, Mayor.
It still is.
It is still morning. I checked. I wanted to ask about the vehicle debt relief. I don't want to discount at all the benefit of a resident being able to pay off their ticket without late fees, penalties, but what is the city's rationale? How are we able to afford foregoing those penalties and late fees for a time?
Thank you.
So harken back to, I want to take you back to our budget process. This was actually a part of that. We have about $100 million in vehicle debt that we work to collect. And as time passes, that debt becomes more and more expensive for those who have yet to pay it back. We have payment plans that we offer to people already, but they still have to pay the penalty. And so part of our budget process this year, we forecasted an amount that we could receive from the revenue above and beyond what we would normally get by allowing people who may not pay their debt back in normal course to do so without that penalty. So we've baked in the costs related to this program into this year's budget.
Understood. And after June 30th, is there going to be a reevaluation to maybe extend that or expand it to other types of debt that are held by Chicago taxpayers?
It's a good question. I mean, I think as we go through this next budget process, all of those type of considerations will be on the table.
Are there any specific types that you would like to see potentially?
Could you repeat yourself?
Are there any specific types of, aside from vehicle debt, are there any specific types?
We do have other debt relief programs in the city of Chicago that are administered through the same Department of Finance, including our utility billing relief programs, our administrative hearing debt program. So the city actually has a pretty robust programs and initiatives that recognizes that certain people need more time. Despite having accrued debt to the city. And I want to be really clear, the city is still providing a service to residents of the city, but we understand that in some cases, people need a little help. And so this is on top of the existing debt relief programs that the city provides.
Thank you. Is that everyone?
Thank you all.
All right,
Yep.
thank you all. Have a great day.